My girlfriend wanted an open relationship with her best friend, but instead of agreeing, I left. Now she's shocked. My girlfriend and her best friend have been close for almost their entire adult lives. Before we got together, they had engaged in threesomes with their past partners on both sides. I had no idea about this until recently, when my girlfriend casually mentioned it about a week before she asked me if I wanted an open relationship. This might be where I messed up, but my immediate response was a firm no. I told her I had no interest in that kind of arrangement. I'm strictly monogamous, and the thought of either sharing her or being shared makes me deeply uncomfortable. It's not that I judge people who engage in open relationships. It's just not for me. Apparently, my girlfriend told her best friend about my reaction, and now the best friend is offended. My girlfriend says I should apologize to her, but I don't believe I did anything wrong. Maybe I could have worded things more delicately, but it's not like I directly insulted her best friend. She wasn't even there when I said it. There seems to be no consensus on whether I was in the wrong, but most people who commented on my situation agreed that I was not the Aholi. Update, March 11th, 2024, 2 days later. After reflecting on the advice I received, I decided to have a serious conversation with my girlfriend. I made it clear that I wasn't sorry for my decision or my reaction, but I also reassured her that my refusal had nothing to do with her best friend personally. I told her that no matter who she suggested, my answer would have been the same. One thing I hadn't initially considered, but that others pointed out, is what my girlfriend would do if her best friend asked her to have a threesome with a boyfriend in the future. Right now, her best friend is single, so it's not an immediate issue, but I asked my girlfriend what she would do in that scenario. She admitted she thought it would be cool, because her previous boyfriends had been fine with it. However, after seeing my reaction, she now fully understood that I would not be okay with it. Then, she asked me why I wouldn't even consider a threesome with 2 women. I told her it wasn't about who was involved. I simply don't like the idea of being with anyone but her. At that point, I asked her an important question. Do you need to have threesomes to be satisfied in a relationship? Instead of giving me a clear yes or no, she tried to dodge the question. She said, I mean, they're just fun, you know? It's kind of a habit by now. I told her that wasn't an answer, and I needed honesty. But she still wouldn't give me a straight response. That was all I needed to hear. I realized that our sexual needs and values were fundamentally different. So I broke up with her. It's honestly frustrating that, out of all the possible reasons for a breakup, this was the thing that ended us. My entire crime was not wanting to have sex with other people while in a committed relationship. For those wondering how she reacted when I broke up with her, she was upset and confused. She told me, it makes no sense for a guy to turn down sex with 2 girls. And breaking up over it makes even less sense. But for me, it made perfect sense. A little about me. I've realized that I might be demisexual. I only feel sexually attracted to people when I have an emotional connection with them. That doesn't mean I avoid relationships or never notice attractive people. But casual sex just doesn't appeal to me. I have no desire to cheat or engage in things like threesomes because I only feel that kind of attraction towards someone I deeply care about. At the end of the day, I stand by my decision. People have different preferences, and that's okay. Some enjoy open relationships and threesomes, while others, like me, prefer commitment and exclusivity. I'd rather be single than compromise my values. Here's to hoping my next relationship comes with fewer threesomes and a lot more mutual understanding. Next, a story of infidelity and the fallout of confessing to a failing marriage. I, 38F, had an affair with my coworker, 44M. First off, I apologize if I'm doing this wrong. This is my first time posting. I, 38F, have been married to my husband, 42M, for 10 years, but our sex life has been virtually non-existent for a long time. I tried to bring up our lack of intimacy multiple times, but no matter how much I begged or suggested counseling, nothing changed. Over time, this built up a lot of resentment. Then last year, a coworker of mine, 44M, began lightly flirting with me. At first, it was harmless. We would chat briefly in passing, and eventually it turned into something more. Then in January, we crossed the line. What started as flirting turned into an affair. I knew it was wrong, but in the moment, I justified it to myself because I felt so emotionally and physically neglected. However, I also knew I couldn't continue like this. Last week, I ended the affair and decided to come clean to my husband. My plan was to take responsibility, tell him the truth, and accept that divorce was likely inevitable. It was terrifying, but I felt it was necessary. The confrontation that never happened. I wrote 2 letters. One that explained everything in detail, and another that just gave a brief summary. I wanted to let my husband decide how much he wanted to know. When I was finally ready, I approached him and said, "We need to talk. It's important." He was tinkering with his motorcycle at the time and casually responded, "Okay, in a minute." I didn't want to push, so I waited. But after he finished, instead of coming to talk, he just sat down and started watching TV. I tried again. "We need to talk." His response, "Can it wait? I'm watching something." At that moment, I felt invisible. After all these years of being ignored, this was my breaking point. I walked away, waited an hour, and then went to check on him again, only to find that he had left the house without saying a word. I called him and asked where he was. His response, "I'm at my friend's place. Relax, we can talk later." That was the final straw. I hung up and started packing my bags. For years, I had begged him to communicate, to acknowledge me, to care about our intimacy. And now, even when I was about to drop a life-altering bombshell, he still couldn't give me the time of day. I called my best friend, who already knew everything, and confession gone wrong. My marriage ends before I even speak. After hanging up on my husband, I sat on the bed, staring at my half-packed suitcase. A part of me still hoped he would come back and ask what was wrong. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should just wait until he was ready to talk. But then I realized that was the same excuse I'd been making for years. For years, I told myself, maybe he'll change. Maybe if I try harder, he'll care. Maybe if I give it more time, he'll see how unhappy I am. But nothing had changed. And this time, I wasn't willing to wait for him to be ready. I called my best friend, who already knew about my affair and my decision to confess. She didn't judge me for what I had done, but she had always told me, "If you're this unhappy, why stay?" That night, I checked into a hotel. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a message. I didn't even tell him I was leaving. Because really, he left first. He just did it emotionally instead of physically. The fallout. The next morning, I turned my phone on to find multiple missed calls. My husband had finally noticed I was gone. I took a deep breath and called him back. Him, where are you? Me, at a hotel. Him, why the hell did you leave? Me, I told you I needed to talk. You ignored me. Him, I was busy. Jesus, you're so dramatic. That was it. That was the moment I knew I was done. I didn't even get to confess the affair. It didn't matter anymore. My marriage had been dead long before I ever crossed the line with my coworker. And now, for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't willing to be the only one trying. I simply said, "I don't want to do this anymore." He went silent. Then he scoffed. "You're seriously leaving me over one night of not talking?" I almost laughed. One night. One night. This wasn't about one night. This was about years of being ignored, dismissed, and feeling like a roommate instead of a wife. This was about crying myself to sleep while he rolled over without even noticing. This was about begging him for intimacy, for affection, for anything, and being met with indifference every single time. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. I just said, "I'll have the divorce papers sent to you." And I hung up. What now? So here I am, sitting in a hotel room, looking at my wedding ring, and wondering what comes next. I don't regret ending my marriage. I regret how I handled things. I regret the affair, because even if my husband had emotionally abandoned me, I should have left before getting involved with someone else. That's on me. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You can't force someone to care. You can't beg for love. And you can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. So now I start over. Alone. And for the first time in a long time, that doesn't scare me. For a long time, I had been feeling neglected in my marriage. I tried to talk to my husband multiple times about the way I felt, unseen, unwanted, and emotionally abandoned. Despite my efforts, I was repeatedly dismissed, brushed aside as if my concerns were insignificant. My best friend, seeing my distress, had encouraged me to leave. She even offered me a place to stay if I needed to get away. Eventually, I accepted her offer and started packing my things. While I was in the middle of packing, my husband came home. He looked around, confused, and asked me what I was doing. I told him plainly, "I'm leaving." His reaction was immediate, frustration, disbelief. "What the hell is your problem?" he snapped. And that was it. That was the moment I snapped, too. Years of pent-up frustration and resentment boiled over, and I exploded in a way I never had before. I'm not someone who yells, but in that moment, I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I'm effing done. I'm done being your effing roommate. I'm done begging you to show me affection. I'm done begging you to talk to me. I'm done trying to fix this by myself. He rolled his eyes. Jesus, you're so dramatic. Heaven forbid I get to relax for a bit. All you do is relax. I shot back. That's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm not bugging you anymore. God, what is it now? He sighed, exasperated. Don't worry about it. You never worried about it. I was sobbing now, shaking with rage and heartbreak. I've lain next to you crying my eyes out, begging you to give a damn, begging you to just hold me, kiss me, hug me. Hell, even just sleep with me. I've begged you to go to counseling, to do anything that would show me I'm not in this alone. And then, instead of acknowledging my pain, he scoffed. Oh, here we go. Boo-hoo. If you're so unhappy, why don't you just find someone else to screw around with? I stared at him, my whole body going numb. He said it so casually, like my suffering was just an inconvenience to him. So I told him the truth. I have. His face changed in an instant. What? Since January? Are you serious? I saw the anger flare up in his eyes. And just like that, now he cared. Now that someone else had been doing what he was supposed to do, suddenly, it mattered to him. The argument escalated. I pulled out the letters I had written to him over the years. Letters that detailed every moment I felt abandoned, every moment I had begged for his attention. But he didn't care. He never did. While we were still fighting, my best friend arrived. She didn't say a word, just grabbed my bags and helped me out the door. I was still yelling in the car, venting years of hurt, but the second we got to her place, I collapsed. I fell to my knees screaming, "This isn't what I wanted," over and over. Because it wasn't. I had been so happy when we got married. We had been in love. And now it was gone. I didn't know why it changed, but it didn't matter anymore. It was dead. And I had helped kill it. At that moment, all hope died too. People always say, why don't you just leave? Like it's the easiest thing in the world. But it was hope that kept me there. As foolish as it may seem, I kept believing, convincing myself, that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. That we could go back to the way things were. But that was never going to happen. The guilt had been eating me alive, but so had the neglect. I hadn't realized just how much anger I had buried until it all came out at once. The next morning, I went back to pick up the rest of my things. My husband threw out some passive-aggressive remarks, which I ignored. I simply told him I'd be staying with my friend permanently, but I would continue paying my half of the bills until things were settled. I didn't want to leave him with everything. You're probably going to be staying with some guy, he sneered. I didn't even react. Whatever. Bye. And that was it. Looking back, I should have left a long time ago. But instead, I stayed, and in staying, I became someone I never wanted to be. People love to say, just leave. But it's not that simple when you're in it. This was supposed to be forever. But it wasn't. And now here I am. As for what people are saying, there's a mix of reactions. Some understand my pain, while others judge my actions. I know cheating isn't the right way to handle things. But what do you do when you feel like you've exhausted every other option? The truth is, none of us are perfect. My marriage was falling apart, and instead of leaving, I made mistakes. I know that. But no one gets to rewrite history to make me the only villain here. I didn't cheat because I wanted to hurt him. I cheated because I had already been hurting for years. Now all I can do is move forward. I don't know what the future holds, but at least the truth is out. At least now we can both stop pretending.